right now, just throw into the chat where you're coming from, because we always get excited to see all of the various places that you're coming from. And I know that everyone on the webinar likes to know that too. We're so glad that you're here for what is going to be a beautiful conversation and collective practice with three leading lights in the healing field. I'm going to briefly introduce each of them, and then we'll begin with a beautiful invocation of practice led by Grace. So since I mentioned Grace, I'll introduce her first. For those of you who have not met Grace Sesma yet, she is a curandera with decades of experience who believes in and encourages a thoughtful inclusion of traditional indigenous healing practices alongside a doctor's conventional medical treatments. She is not a proponent of an either-or approach, but rather a both-and approach, so that allopathic medicine can become more attuned to the cultural needs of Mexican and indigenous patients, and also begin to include cultural practitioners such as curanderas and native traditional healers as part of a multidisciplinary treatment to treat the whole person. We also have with us leading teacher and luminary Dr. Sue Morter. She's an international speaker, as many of you know, a teacher, a master of bioenergetic medicine, and an author. Her visionary model and techniques are really based on a new approach to living in creative genius and personal freedom. And that's done by capturing and enhancing high frequency energy patterns in the body. She draws from her experience as a doctor for over 30 years to help create joy for everyone through sharing her discoveries. And of course, many of you likely know our dear colleague, Eileen McKusick, who is a pioneering researcher, writer, inventor, and practitioner, as well as teacher on sound, therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health, also a prolific writer and author. She has an MA in integrative education and has studied the effects of sound on the human body and its electromagnetic system since 1996. It is such a pleasure to have each of you with us for this very beautiful healing circle on honoring the feminine. Thank you so much for being with us.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Grace, we would be so honored for you to lead us in a proper invocation, honoring the ancestors on whose land we all stand.
Thank you. Taking a couple of minutes to light my sage, my copal, all the sacred medicines of one of the most important feminine presences in all of our lives, which is Mother Earth. And thank you for asking me to give this opening prayer to set our intention for our circle, but also to take a breath together and settle into our chairs, and just remembering that we're a reflection of one another, reflection of the divine feminine, whether you're male or female or you identify along that spectrum. So Creator, Grandfather Sun, Grandmother Moon, star ancestors, to you, grandmothers and grandfathers of the four directions, to you, Mother Earth, I offer you this medicine. I offer you these prayers and this smoke, and gratefulness for this day, and gratefulness for bringing us together in this circle to speak about the feminine and to honor all of our female ancestors, to send forth blessings to our descendants, to send blessings out to all who are with us in this circle. You, Mother Earth, are our first mother, our first altar. You who are all of creation, who teaches us about balance and harmony, who teaches us about life and death and transmutation, restoration, regeneration, about inclusiveness, about honoring one another, about abundance. We thank you for all these blessings. And we ask you to guide this conversation, to open our hearts and our minds to each other's words and thoughts. And I ask for guidance from the grandmother so that whatever is said here, whatever is shared, goes out to all who listen to bless them in the best way for themselves, their families, and their community, and for all our relations in nature. For all of creation, I offer these words. Choko to say for all the relations. And I want to add that my prayers are flowing out from the sacred lands of the Arapaho, the Ute, and the Cheyenne peoples. I am in Netherlands, Colorado. And so I thank the ancestors and the descendants and the people still living, praying, doing ceremony, and honoring their lands for the gift of being here on their own sacred land. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Grace. What a beautiful way to lead us into our collective discussion today. And we titled this Honoring the Feminine because I've just been experiencing some curiosity, particularly when it relates to how we honor or perhaps omit the feminine, particularly in health and medicine, because that is, as you know, where I and most of us are doing most of our work. And I'll just take a step back and share again from my perspective, which is very much informed from the East Indian spiritual traditions. As many of you know, I was raised in the tradition of Jainism, but also have studied a bit of Buddhism and Vedanta and Tantric texts as well. So from that perspective, we understand that, the whole division of masculine and feminine is a mental, construct really to some degree. And of course we see it, we've labeled it as such in nature because we see things. So we understand that from those perspectives, formless oneness, which is sometimes, as you know, in the tantric traditions described as Shiva, actually has a masculine and feminine component. Shiva is often as a personification of that oneness, shown in both masculine and feminine forms. And from those philosophies and traditions, we explore how consciousness comes into form through Shakti, which is generally depicted as a feminine principle, the manifest power that gives rise to form in the universe, and the diversity and the continued diversity of expressions of consciousness and form. Now we move and explore, well, how does this relate to medicine, the way we view healing in the body? And we learn that particularly here in the allopathic models, and even in Western psychology to a great degree, we have focused on what we often describe as masculine type principles. And here we're not necessarily talking male and female, but sort of a more masculine approach that's associated with the mind, the capacity to distinguish, to kind of create concepts and different sorts of ideas. So we begin to slice and dice these expressions of consciousness, which are all actually connected, into discrete things. And we've taken that really far, right, in medicine. So we are really good at like studying organs, studying cells, but it hasn't been until lately that we begin to look at those interconnections. And of course, we know that for several hundred years, at least in the Western world, while we were really focusing on the mental aspects, the slicing, the dicing, the approach to the mind, the study of the brain, there was quite a large omission of emotion, which is often related to feminine principles and very much related to the concepts of vital energy in many traditions. There was sort of an omission of that for many, many years. And only recently did we begin to see that, oh, our emotions actually affect our body. This is like new news to Western thinking of medicine. So we're seeing these evolutions, but as many of you know, I was very, very surprised to see a censorship of my talk with TED on sort of the evolution of what I see as the bringing back of the feminine principles into medicine, which have much to do with the biofield. So of course, from the Eastern perspective, the idea of the biofield as energy, literally the manifest power of energy that guides the entire universe and creates form, is also the energy that heals and connects us. And it seems to me that trepidation of the Western medical mind, with folks that run TED, say Wikipedia, and these other platforms, is very much informed by a complete omission, perhaps even a dishonoring or an ignorance of the feminine principle of medicine. But if we look at placebo, if we look at, mind-body approaches, the effects of emotions and even energy, we begin to see, well, wait, it doesn't have to be an either or. So there's that curiosity, about the omission, or perhaps an ignorance of the feminine principles as it relates to healing. And then, interestingly, we see this still also shared by many spiritual leaders of today, a sort of I would say, if I could just say it plainly, I think, kind of an ignorance of what energy healing may be about. And it's unfortunate that I'm coming across this. So recently, a student of mine gave me a book by Sadhguru. Many of you may know who Sadhguru is. He's a very popular spiritual teacher from India, really coming from East Indian perspectives, but also very much, as he says, not teaching from scholarship, but based on his own experience, but still very, very rooted in those traditions, yoga, meditation. And he's very forward about talking about energy. And so I was very excited to read this book. So I was reading this book, which is on karma. And at the very end, he actually finally talks a little bit about energy healing in the energy body. And he says, I have pointed out the dangers of working with energy to any number of self-professed healers. Many who have looked closely at this work have given it up. Those for whom it is a lucrative livelihood has continued. If you are healing people so that their ailments are actually going away, it is dangerous. He then goes on to say, you will also find that if you try healing others, within 9 to 11 months, much suffering will come to you. The suffering need not be in the form of physical calamities. It could be psychological as well. So he says other things which are very provocative and, to me, kind of displaying a lack of a full understanding of what this is. So I was very, very surprised to read that. And when I reflected on all of it, I thought, wow, I really feel like this is because we're still taking such a masculinized approach to even the understanding what healing is and what energy healing is about. I would love to hear your reflections. And so we'll just, we don't have to go in order. Anyone who feels called to speak, I know we're all going to give each other time and space to share.
Well, I guess I'll add a couple of comments, especially I was surprised about the comment that suffering will come to you if you start trying to heal others. I think that is a very limited view, ignorant even, that is obviously informed by his own issues of masculinity, maybe other things. But in our tradition, in my tradition as someone who practices curanderismo, that is definitely very influenced by our indigenous teachings from Mexico in particular. When we are doing our best to follow our calling to be of service through first healing ourselves as much as possible, because it's a journey, but to help our community, we don't get sick if we are doing it with a clear mind, a clear heart, with compassion, in the spirit of service, not in the spirit of commodifying our teachings, of creating wealth for ourselves. If there is suffering, it's only, I think, perhaps at the beginning when we are trying to learn our path, and perhaps there's certain lessons that are placed before us in order for us to nurture a sense of compassion, of understanding for other people's illnesses and emotional states. So I'm very surprised that at that comment. I totally disagree with that. Obviously, it's subjective. Everybody has a different experience, but for the most part, in my tradition, I don't see that at all.
Thank you, Grace.
Yes, I would have to say that really giving our time to commenting on a limiting statement like that isn't really the ideal way for us to share what feminine energy is really about and what healing truly is. As ultimately, I know for myself, and I know those that are on this panel today, that we're not trying to heal anyone. We're creating an environment in which healing can happen. And there's an unconditionality that happens in that approach that can serve everyone. And if I am conditionally going into a situation with a particular outcome in mind, and I'm attached to that outcome, then I can cause myself harm, whether it is about a healing environment or any other environment in the course of our lives. It's really about unconditionality, I think, that we can relate to in terms of someone making statements along these lines. It simply isn't a reflection of wholeness. And so it doesn't really stir me much. I kind of just understand that there's a bigger picture that we can share with people, that those that have been studying with us or crossing our paths in some way are certainly aware that we are interested in this true holism, and a healing environment is a byproduct of that. And everything that we can do to be inclusive and to see the role that every modality plays, we begin to come from this place of wholeness and this feminine approach to life and to healing in general. And so I really feel that it is about harm only comes when we have placed conditions upon a circumstance and those conditions aren't being met and we are in resistance and attachment to that. It's the only way that harm can happen. And so if we are freely, openly revealing a sense of wholeness and demonstrating that and creating environments in which others can model that and their energy fields can find something stable and all embracing in such a way, then they begin to heal as well. So I'm all in and agreeing with you that it's a little shocking to hear teachers that are widespread and having a large impact on large numbers of people. But we're also experiencing that in every facet of healthcare and just about every other topic that humanity comes upon. There are those that are really embracing a place of holism and those that are still learning about that. And I kind of feel like that's what we're looking at here.
Thank you, Sue. Such wise words. And I love your suggestion that we don't get mired into the reactivity of an incomplete view, but rather, as you say, take a step back of a perspective of, from the perspective of wholeness, understanding what's really happening.
Yes.
And continuing to embody that wholeness.
Yes. And really understanding how healing happens. When we understand how healing actually happens, we realize that we're not doing it to anyone. We're not healing anyone. And we're just awake to what is required for healing to happen. And we're busy creating that environment and releasing conditions and opening circumstances to a greater degree than individuals or an individual might be operating from at any given time. And when they begin to experience a greater opening, healing is a byproduct of that. So we're not going in gangs of, gangbusters and guns a-blazing to go make some healing happen. That's not exactly a feminine approach to life. And so, it's the time for us to kind of wake up to, as a larger and larger community, that we have what it takes to heal. And we just need to be shown those parts of us that have been sort of marginalized in our lifetimes. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sue. Eileen, your perspective, your thoughts.
Well, Shamini, I've always taken issue with you calling me a healer because I feel very strongly that the work I do, I'm just listening, and I'm watching the body's organizing intelligence fix itself. I just kind of give commentary on what's happening. I say to my clients, I'm like, you and I don't have to intend anything. Your organizing intelligence knows how to fix itself. And you and I are just going to watch the process as this happens, because we all know that I mean, we all know, and it seems like everybody on here knows, that the body heals itself. And it seems like some strange revelation to Western medicine that the body actually heals itself, right? But it does, and it does it beautifully. So I think that's a crazy statement, that sending healing to somebody is gonna like come back and do bad juju to you. That's strange to even say that, honestly, I think. But
Yeah. What I'd like to mention is that I love the way that you, Sue, and you, Eileen, describe the process of healing for yourselves. I think we use different language, but we're all speaking the same language. Because for me, when I'm speaking or working with a client, I'm just a member of the team, right? And for me, because my practice is so spiritually based within my cultural tradition, I may say that I have a healing team. I have perhaps certain spirit helpers. I access creator. The client or patient, if you're a physician, they themselves carry the record of what has happened to them that has gotten them to this place. And so, as you were saying, Eileen, you just read, right? You're reading their own story, which is basically what I'm also doing. I'm sort of reading their story either with my hands or with my spiritual vision, or perhaps my healing spirits that guide and help me are giving me certain information. So it's a team effort for sure. And I think we're all saying the same thing, yet just using different words to describe what it means to heal the whole person, body, mind, spirit, interdimensionally, if you will.
I love what you're saying, Grace, and I love exploring this too in terms of whole person learning. One of the things that we recently chatted about for the Consciousness and Healing Initiatives Healing Practitioner Council, which we just had a meeting this week, really, and just sort of discussing how do we share this information, broadly with people so that they can benefit. And there was a discussion of how, true understanding isn't just about feeding the head. You can't change someone's mind. You can only appeal to the heart, right, through experience. And ultimately, when I consider what does, bringing the feminine into a currently sort of lopsided view of healing in medicine look like, I'm always guided back to the importance of experience. I think each of you talked about that in your own way. And interestingly, all of you were very clear that it's not experience as in I'm driving something, right? But I'm witnessing something. I am opening space for something. I'm listening to the inner wisdom of the body in this case. And unfortunately, I don't think that there is enough knowledge and wisdom that's being shared by our community to the broader community about what this is. I know each of you are doing it fabulously. And I also want to thank each of you for being guest faculty in our Science of Healing course, where you're sharing these perspectives and practices, right? Because I know that you're doing that, and I know you're doing it in your own teachings as well. And I'm seeing a lot of really wonderful comments in the chat too from, clearly people who are very aligned with healing, probably doing their own healing work. Also, they're sort of in the know on this. Are there particular practices that come to you when you think of kind of rebalancing? Because we live in a world that's lopsided. It's not just science that's lopsided. Sue, alluded to this earlier. Many of our systems are sort of experiencing this lopsidedness. As I understand it, Grace, there are indigenous prophecies on sort of the rebalancing of the masculine and feminine principles, ways of being at this time. So each of us probably have our own ways that we sort of try to come into harmony and come back to a state of wholeness in a world that can be very lopsided and almost, if you will, driven a bit more by the masculine principles than the feminine principles. I'm curious if you have any reflections or practices that you'd like to share.
Oh, for bringing ourselves back to center in a world that is very dispersing at this time and polarized in many moments on many topics, remembering the truth of who we are is really one of the most profound things that we can do to stabilize and not be getting caught up in the mind field, which is based in duality, but to really land back into the heart space, which is the magnetizer and the unifier. You know, the mind separates things, as you were saying earlier, Shamini, that the mind is designed to make distinctions on various separated items, aspects of the whole. And the heart's job is to gather those things back together, to unify. And so we're here pulsating all the time between making distinctions and differentiations and then integrating it and putting it all together again and feeling into that and then moving back out into the world and implementing that or discovering how it might be relevant and then drawing it back in and interpreting and integrating and digesting and metabolizing what we're experiencing. And if someone is free to do that, they are always healing. They are always evolving and always growing. And one of the things that I like to share with people is that healing is a byproduct of revealing our true magnificence. When we reveal our true authentic selves, the distorted version of who we are that gets created by living in the mind too much starts to reconfigure when we stop living in the distortions from the stories that we write and the reactions that we have, and we come back home to what is wholly true. We are then able to reframe some of the conclusions and the misperceptions that we gathered along the way earlier in life when we didn't really have enough information about who we are and we're just trying to survive and make it work, etc. So I like to introduce this practice to people that allows them to just come back home. And it's a simple thing that we can do, and we can do it in the middle of doing other things as well, which is always convenient and helpful. And it is simply a very old idea from Eastern principles about consciousness, about really referencing self versus other, and having an idea about what self feels like, and being on subject or having our consciousness land on a story or an object or something in the outer world or something that's in the news, or the idea that someone has said something that is affecting us all so much, type of thing. And to just come back home, to gather our consciousness in the core of our own system versus getting dispersed and distracted out there into the world and getting stuck out there in the story. And so if everyone could just take a moment right now and look at something in your room, whether it's a pillow or the doorknob or something off of the center of where we are right now, and just kind of throw your energy onto that. Just give it all of your attention right now. And notice how that feels in the body when you do that. And then as a point of comparison, let's just pull all of your energy back into your own system. Just gather it back onto you, into your heart, into your belly, into your deep core, and just breathe and be aware of coming home. And notice how that feels in the body when you draw the energy, the essence, just right back onto subject instead of onto this object in the room. And a simple exercise like that has become such a profound practice for so many people that I've just inadvertently mentioned that to over the years, that I get feedback on this all the time, that subject, object, subject allows people to remember, oh, I was getting so caught up in the story. I was getting so caught up in the headlines. I was getting so caught up in the memory of this thing that happened in my life 50 years ago, that part of me is hooked into that. And I'm now not able to experience the wholeness of my being because part of me is resting in or tangled up in some entanglement that is irrelevant to the truth of my essence. And while it might seem so simple, it is something that will allow us to start to build new neurocircuitry as a reference point that keeps us coming from home base rather than living on the front porch and constantly being, interested in everybody that's walking by and everything that's happening, and wondering why, there's nothing happening, why the fire in the hearth is going out because no one's tending to it, and to simply just land back into the self and onto the self. And in doing so, we are instantly reminded of the true essence that is here. And when that is happening, we are automatically activating the natural healing systems of the body. We are automatically giving little signals through the form of epigenetics. The little antennas on the surface of our cells are picking up now on a more complete environment, one that is filled with grace and wholeness. And then they're reporting that information inside our cells, which are then telling the cells of our bodies to produce certain chemistries, certain neurotransmitters are being generated, and those messages are rising up to the brain, and the brain is then getting a signal that all is well instead of getting in the fight. And we constantly can be referencing and recreating this environment by a simple thing. Literally throw your energy off of you and notice how it feels. Pull your energy back onto you and notice how it feels. And develop a practice of allowing that to be your come from. And as we do so, we start to have a different filtering system that interprets all of life from an entirely different perspective, because the baseline is all is well when we're home. The baseline is, I got to fix something or I got to do something when we are splatted or dispersed out onto the objects of life. So as not to take on much more time, but
so beautiful.
Practice.
Thank you.
I like the way you describe that. That's very similar, I think, to some of our indigenous practices, whether it be using the smoke to restore ourselves, to pull back. We don't describe it in that way, but that's essentially what we're doing.
Yes.
We're pulling back, bringing back into our body, mind, and spirit, all those aspects of ourselves that we've left at different, pieces of ourselves that we leave in our community, especially for us who are in communities that are dealing with not having water, communities whose treaties are being broken by the government because oil is being spilled into pristine waterways. So when we have to go out into the world to pray for the water, even though perhaps the government is sending soldiers against us, like they did during Standing Rock in 2016, it's the elders pulling us back together through ceremony, through that prayer that brings our spirits back, getting into a sweat lodge. Those are aspects of how we bring back to us the pieces that we leave behind, or that, quite frankly, others may take from us in the process of us doing our work out in the world, because, not everyone is able to necessarily be in these practices without having to be in the world, without having to come face to face with the fact that it's a food desert where they live, where there's other things that are going on that we have to take a stand for. If, like in, 2018, when the children were being placed in camps, as a healer, as someone who is referred to by her community as a healer, as their curandera, and being asked to march with them, I go out there, I say my prayers, and there's parts of me that obviously I am giving away at that time, so my energy. So when I get home, my practice to bring back all those aspects of myself is to take that breath, to light my medicines, my sage, my copal, to breathe it in. And the copal in our indigenous tradition is very feminine. It's female. It's the divine feminine in the smoke as it twirls up. So as we talk about the feminine, that's how that divine feminine shows up in our life to help cleanse us, protect us, and bring back those pieces of our spirit that we've left in other areas when we're doing our work in that way.
Oh, Grace, thank you so much for that reflection and that sharing, and the reality of the need to continue to not just hold space, but take action for proper social justice. Again, coming from the feminine principle, or just the wholeness principle, if we want to call it that, right? Understanding that sometimes means you have to take a stand, and then the need also to return back to the wholeness in order to
Yeah,
really
back to
truly
the heart.
embody that in the work, right?
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
it's really important. Back in the day, in my 20s, I remember having these conversations with some social activists at the time that I was engaged with. This was Students Against Sweatshops, and we led sit-ins at the university to prevent contracts with Nike for sweatshop labor and things like that. And we would have these really deep conversations because they didn't quite understand the spiritual side of what I did at that time, or my appreciation. And I would try to explain this to them, that you can't just fuel with anger. You're going to burn
Right.
yourself out. That doesn't work. And as you know, Amit Goswami and so many have written about spiritual activism and where the core of spiritual act, and we see these examples everywhere. So I love that you have made this very tangible and real for us, because coming into wholeness doesn't mean that we don't do anything when it needs to be done.
That's right. That's right.
Mm. Mhm.
Eileen, any thoughts from your perspective as you listen to this?
Well, the only thing that I'm coming up with in this moment sounds really trite, especially compared to what Grace just said, but it's what's on my mind, so I'll just share it. I've never been a really big fan of formal meditation, sitting and formal. And so I developed my own system that I call Snuggie Time with the Universe, where, at the end of a busy day, seeing a lot of clients, doing a lot of stuff, and feeling a little, I don't want to put any demands on myself for this, that, or the other. So I'll just lie down on my bed and hug a pillow and pretend like it's a dog or something, but it's like life itself or God, and just snuggie, just spoon life itself and be grateful. For gratitude is such a go-to for me. I love the saying about, say thank you 10,000 times a day. It's definitely a practice that has been so helpful for me. It's such a simple thing, and yet it's can be so powerful. And so to just be able to lie down for a 20-minute nap with no expectation, find a sunbeam, hug a pillow, and just be grateful for the simple things that you've got. It doesn't have to be formal. Or find a dog. Dogs are kind of like God, like the whole unconditional love thing. To just give yourself permission to just like snuggie and not have any rules or rituals or anything, but just a few minutes of quiet-minded, allowing yourself to be content and grateful. So
I love it. And I
yeah.
love you for bringing gratitude into the conversation as well. Our dear friend Paul Mills, who I think most of you know, has some really beautiful reflections on gratitude and sort of the deeper meanings of the aspects of gratitude. And as many of you know, he's done research in the area. So pleased to have him with us in so many ways, and including in the Science of Healing course as well. I really love what each of you have said about, some of these themes of the practices that are really the most key for you are truly about going within, whatever that means, whatever that practice is, to sort of take whatever attention has been focused, quote, out there and bring it back in here. That's really the core of it. And there's so many ways to do it. If I might share, for me, that practice looks pretty similar as well. And what I notice is, of course, when I'm focused out there, my mind's going a million miles a minute, right? I'm out of my body energetically, like I'm here, I'm there, I'm all over the place, and everything is moving really fast. But when I do a practice similar to what you all have described of just literally going within, one of the things that I allow my mind to do is just to observe the energy flows in my body. And by doing that, just relaxing into the subtle sensations in the body and simply observing them, not trying to direct them, not even necessarily labeling them or as stuck or flowing or anything, but literally just coming into observation so that the mind and the energy are really, truly united. And there's nothing, as you said, to do, right? There's nothing to do. We have a few minutes. Would it be okay if I just led a little bit of a practice in that for all of us? Right.
Sure.
So mine is a very simple one. And we just start with the breath. And we don't have to breathe in any particular way. In and out of the nose is fine. In and out with the mouth. In with the nose, out the mouth, whatever your body wants to do. Noticing the inflows and outflows of the breath and where it touches in the body. And perhaps noticing sensations in particular areas of the body. Perhaps the heart, the gut, even the toes. Bringing our awareness into the instrument, the physical instrument of our being. We may experience ourselves as subtle flows of vibration. In the physical body, but also more than that. And because we are infinite, we simply connect. Without any effort needed. Simply a resting in the knowingness of our connection across time and space in the here and now. Resting in the support of our collective awareness. Noticing the collective breath. Giving thanks to ourselves and each other for engaging in the collective practice of returning to wholeness. If you've had your eyes closed, you can open them. So simple. Such a simple way. Now, I know that this is an incredible opportunity for all of us to be together, and for all of you who have joined us, thank you. I see that there are hundreds of you right now joining live with us, and I want to honor that. If our dear sisters here agree, we do have a way for you to ask a few questions, if you'd like, of the panel, because it's, we're all super busy, and I'm so grateful to each of you for taking time to be together and come together for this healing circle. If any of you have a burning question, I'm going to ask you to put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen here if you're joining us on Zoom. So you go to Q&A, simply type in any question that you might have, and then I'll kind of raise them for the group. I think we're seeing a lot of gratitude for everything at the moment. That's beautiful. So questions are coming in, and perhaps while we wait for more, this is a beautiful question, really, from Ella. How can I help? Is the question. Eileen?
Well, the best way to help is to take care of yourself well, because the better you take care of yourself, the better able you are to help. And that's not always an easy thing to do. It's almost counterintuitive, right? Because we've been this sort of idea of service above self, and we've got to go and minister and take care of everybody else. I know so many women who've just burnt themselves out to like burnt toast, following that. Whereas if we can just put ourselves first in that equation and take really good care of ourselves, knowing, eating well, sleeping right, our human animal is something that we don't always recognize. Your body is your horse that you ride through this plane on. And a lot of us, are throwing pizza into a dirty stall at the end of the day because we're so exhausted from taking care of everyone else. So we're feeding the horse things that it doesn't need. We're not brushing it with love, right? So if you think of your body like your human animal, that the healthier and the stronger and the better tended to, it's going to be in better spirits. It's going to be more playful. It's going to be just better able to serve. So the best way you can help others is by helping yourself really well first.
I love that. I love that. And it reminds me of what Sue said earlier about really embodying the wholeness. And I would just add to that the best way we can help, as you know, a lot of our work at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative is to help people understand the evidence behind these healing approaches, the reality of the evidence, and then, how do we incorporate that in our daily lives? Even if we have these, these, say, blockages or obstacles to delivering that knowledge, which we do in some cases with some platforms, we can continue to be like water and sort of flow past them as opposed to fight fire with fire. And what that means is that for us as a community to literally stand in our wholeness and sort of unapologetically share what we know about both our observations, our practice, and the science is very, very powerful. And when we do that in a way that it flows like water versus like fire, there's no defensiveness needed, right? There is, though, a need to continue to educate ourselves on that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we created our Science of Healing course. And we're so pleased because we're really trying to take that broader approach that is incorporating practice perspectives as well as the latest cutting edge peer-reviewed published science. And I think the more of us that stand in that, that sense of wholeness and authority, the quicker that we'll be able to bring wholeness into medicine. So that's just my perspective. And I do want to invite those of you who are interested. Jason will put a link in the chat. I'm so pleased to have Grace, Eileen, and Sue be part of this course. We have just a dynamite course of scientists, healing practitioners, leading teachers. Jason will put the link in the chat. If you haven't heard of the course yet, you will probably soon. And it's just scienceofhealingcourse.com, I think. Scienceofhealingcourse.com. Jason will put it in the chat. But that's my perspective. Stand in our wholeness and embrace the wholeness of all the perspectives. We don't have to be anti-science. We don't have to be anti-practice. We're bringing those things together. Okay, we have lots more questions. Sorry, I'm not being the best curator at the moment. This is a beautiful question from Michelle. What aha moments have occurred in your life to lead you deeper in your journey of understanding energy healing? What a beautiful question.
Well, mine was more than an aha moment. It was a transcendental moment that I had initially about 22 years ago in which I lit up in another dimensional version of who I am. And so prior to that, I was a doctor in a clinic, minding my own business, working with energy medicine. Energy medicine is the only healthcare that I've ever had. My father was a pioneer in energy medicine. And so I've never gone to the doctor to get an antibiotic to heal something. So I know that the body has the ability to heal itself as long as these systems are aligned. And so I was in a state of meditation and lit up in a realm far beyond this physical flesh and bone version of ourselves. And I was me, but I wasn't in a physical body. And I was in a light so brilliantly bright, it was 10 times brighter than the brightest day in the desert I had ever seen. And I was me, but I wasn't in a body. I was a ray of light, and I was above the earth so high that the earth looked like a marble beneath me. That's how far exalted I was. And I could see 360 degrees actually spherically in every direction simultaneously. And every time I took a breath, this beautiful horizon would rise and fall. This pink, translucent, iridescent light would rise up. And as I would exhale, it would fall back into place. And this brilliant light above this horizon and this bright light below it. And I knew that what was happening in this actioning of breath was that this light was actually becoming love as it passed through my own system. And I knew that this is what every one of us is doing, that the degree to which we will allow love to pass through us without hesitating and continue to breathe life force into it is the degree to which we make a difference on this planet. And it is the reason that we come. We come to learn how to do that no matter what, even with all the distractions that happen in life and all the reasons to not do that. If we're constantly choosing in that sort of alignment, we're really doing deep soulful work. And it's quite simple, really, to let it unfold in this way. So that moment, I'll just lastly say, in that moment, there was nothing missing. There was nothing broken. There was nothing that needed to be healed. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to become or to accomplish or to achieve. It simply was already there. I was already all of that. And I know that this is the truth of each of us. And we're here to train our minds to stay on course to serve that truth rather than going off on its own, getting dispersed and getting out there and writing stories and paying attention to others' stories as if that is what is real. We're here to dissolve that illusion. And so that was definitely a defining moment in my life experience.
That is just amazing. Thank you, Sue, so much for sharing that. What a powerful story. Yeah, I've shared some of my stories in my book, so I won't even bother. They're not at all that beautiful, but they were pretty profound for me and similar, like just slices of that. What a beautiful story. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It was beautiful. And it's remarkable to me that we share so many aspects of your aha moment. I had something very similar. I think I was 30 when I had that similar experience, and especially where you're above the earth almost, right? You're looking down. But additionally, I was shown there was pinpoints of light everywhere I saw. And I knew that those pinpoints of light were a reflection of the light that I am.
Yes.
But in that reflection, there's still that unity, that we're actually just that one energy. My students laugh when I said one time, I said, I used to really I still love to dance. And back in my younger days, of course, it was the time of disco. And I remember I was having a great time dancing under this big disco ball. And the disco ball started reflecting, right? All these bits of light. And in that moment, I went into this other space and I realized that is spirit. That is the unity. And we're just that reflection of the light that goes out in all directions. So I gave him that example of the disco ball, which is very prosaic. But to me, that's one tiny little example of exactly what you were describing, that we all are. And that was one of my aha moments. And I'm really grateful for the poetic and beautiful, eloquent way in which you described and shared your experience. So that just was beautifully said. And it's
Thank
so
you.
hard to describe something that is really almost undescribable, that one has to experience it. We can describe it, but unless we experience it, it's a challenge, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Just to chime in here, I have also had the experience of being up high, looking down, feeling one love, feeling interconnectedness, the breath part too, right? We've all had these glimpses into this eternal space where all is well, where everything is whole and perfect. And I think that once you get that glimpse, it becomes a North Star for you. Even when you're in the splat, as Sue says, there's some part of you that's still connected,
Right.
to that place of expandedness. And that allows you to be both, that you can be both connected to that eternal, all is well, illuminated space. And you can also be having your human experience at the same time. They don't have to be one or the other. No?
That's right.
That's such a beautiful and important reflection, Eileen, and honestly one that merits like a full deep discussion. If we ever get a chance to discuss integration, I think this is key for so many folks right now, including those who are exploring entheogens and having more of these experiences in different ways, whether through meditation or spontaneously. It's huge. And gee, we have a ton of questions, you guys, and I am sorry, though, they're beautiful questions. And many of them, are very important questions and geared towards one or two of you guys, and maybe for all of you. So I would love for each of you to share with everyone, and Jason will put links in too. I think he's familiar with some of your pages, how everyone can get in touch with you. I want to remind everyone that you will receive much wisdom from each of these beautiful teachers in our Science of Healing course. More practices as well as reflections on the research. So thank you again for being part of that. It's really been our honor to help bring this together with our guest faculty. It's amazing. And each of you do your own teaching quite actively and work as well. And many people would like to learn more about that. So could each of you just share a little bit about how people can be in contact with you?
I'll start. Biofieldtuning.com. You can learn all about biofield tuning, sound therapy tools. I've got some books back here that you can check out. And I also have a website called electrichealth.com. So if anybody's doing any scholarly research on the biofield, I compiled a lot of articles and put them there, and also a lot of mainstream articles about the electric nature of life. So there's just some resources. Certainly, I know Shamini has got a ton of resources there too, but we're all about compiling it to make your life easier, to go spread the good word about all of this.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yes. And I am at drsuemorter.com, drsuemorter.com, and have books and resources as well. Lots of programming, lots of live and in person and broadcasting pretty regularly, kind of almost always. And there's plenty there for you to jump in a short program or an extensive program. So learning all about quantum science and the applications of the bridging of science and spirituality really is what I'm very interested in doing, and through the work of bioenergetics and how we affect our lives in terms of our true understanding of what we're doing here. So it's my greatest joy is to share that. So please let me know if I can serve you in any way.
Thank you so much, Sue. And Grace, how can folks be in touch with you? What's the best way?
The best way now is gracesesma.com or curanderismo.org, which is a little trickier for you to write down. But gracesesma.com is, you can find information about my practice, events that are coming up. And I also have resources and links to articles and books that might be helpful for people who are interested in Mexican traditional medicine to learn a little bit more about it. And if you want to experience a healing session with me, of course, you can reach me through my website. And if you don't mind, speaking of healing, I am going to be offering ancestral healing through the wisdom and teachings of Dia de Muertos on the Shift network. And that's starting next Tuesday. And there's still time for people to sign up for that if that's something that interests you.
That's fabulous. And Jason has put all your links in the chat. So everybody look at the chat. The links are right there so you can click right in, open all the windows so you can dial into that. And many of you often ask, can I access this recording later? Yes, you can. We offer this recording freely to everyone for the next 48 hours all weekend. Share it with others. You know, we always love to be able to share this. We are a social profit. The Consciousness and Healing Initiative is a 501c social profit. We are supported in large capacity by donors, and all of you who have joined as Chi contributors, thank you so much for doing that. Do check out the Science of Healing course too, because it's just going to be a phenomenal gathering of brilliant hearts and minds like this. We want to thank you all for your time. Oh, and yes, to mention that if you do enroll in the course, you will have like a lifetime copy of this recording as well as part of the course. This is going to be considered part of our education on healing. It's very important. And I think after listening to this conversation, you would very much agree. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sue, Grace, Eileen, for sharing your light and wisdom with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shamini.
Thanks, Shamini.
Blessings to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Blessings.
Somebody.
Bye.